we are now realizing as Africa that our indigenous animals were the very best for food security and for our own environment.
It is very difficult to delink a pasture race from livestock.
In Kenya, it will be very difficult to find a pure red Maasai.
What you cannot measure, you cannot manage. We must start measuring.
In Africa, indigenous livestock plays an integral part in the livelihoods of majority of the rural population. They contribute to nutritional security by providing meat, milk, eggs, and other important farm inputs such as drought power and manure that are used to sustain a crop production for food and feed.
The indigenous animal genetic resources also are a source of manure. Most of the farmers in East Africa cannot afford fertilizer and therefore rely heavily on manure as a way of input in the agricultural production.
Indigenous breeds are well adapted, for example, to the production environment, especially with the climate change effects, where there's a drought, limited feed, diseases. These can survive, so it's a sustainable production system using the indigenous animals. They also tolerate heat, so in terms of global warming, indigenous animals are a potential solution.
Majority of these indigenous species contain tremendous genetic variations arising from natural selection for adaptation to different environments and to an extent from human intervention through artificial selection for specialized breeding. This diversity is essential for food security and provide the flexibility needed to adapt to the ever-changing environmental conditions.
The sustainable utilization and conservation of African livestock breeds is essential if animal production is to respond positively to challenges such as population growth, urbanization, and climate change. The development of the African indigenous livestock breeds is therefore a priority for Africa. Livestock production is an important component of many African economies and contributes 30 to 50% to the agricultural GDP. Indeed, African indigenous livestock breeds are essential for food security in Africa and contribute to the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people.
These indigenous breeds are also important to agriculture because they are adapted to harsh local conditions, contain unique genetic materials that can be used for breeding programs, and are often a passion for poor households because they are easier to keep than exotic breeds.
In the arid and semi-arid region, it's not possible for you to keep an exotic animal like a Frisian because it cannot withstand the high temperatures. But the indigenous livestock that are kept there, which are the local sheep and the local goat and the local cattle, they are adapted to that environment and therefore they're able to utilize that resource.
The red Maasai is one of the animals kept by the Ma community. Ma community includes Samburu, Maasai, Laikipia, and these people have kept this animal for centuries. Okay, until recently, scientists used to think this is a small animal and it may not have a value, but with research, they have realized that this animal has resistance against worms. And this resistance is not just environmental, it's actually genetic. It's one of the few animals in the world that have a genes that makes it be resistant to worms.
Indigenous animals are actually quite superior to the exotic ones because they can survive the harsh conditions. They can survive where feed is limited. They can survive where there's disease. which the exotic breeds might not be able to do.
You can hardly accelerate the growth of brands. So you cannot speed up like what you normally do with other breeds. These ones take their time, and they take their time to mature, and they mature in that short time, and they give very good quality meat. When I say good quality meat, I mean soft, well marbled, and very, very tasty.
The size of the animal, when we talk about the slaughterhouse, only the indigenous species is able to give that.
The taste of their meat is different from the exotic breeds.
In a world threatened by climate change, breeds that are resistant to drought, extreme heat or tropical diseases are of major potential importance. Many of these African indigenous breeds are now endangered, and their unique adaptive traits may be lost forever.
In Kenya, it will be very difficult to find a pure red Maasai. There are only a few ones, and if we find them, they are in the labs or in the research institution, which means we are almost going to lose this animal, which otherwise is a very useful animal for the future.
Some of the breeds that are already extinct. In Lesotho, we have the Basotho pony, which is extinct. In Malawi, this is the North Malawi zebu. We do not really have it anymore. It's not pure. And then for South Africa, we also have the following: the cattle, horse, and sheep breeds that are extinct. For pigs, is the large black. In Zimbabwe, the Binga, Govuvu, and the Pekanite breeds.
The sustainable conservation and utilization of these animals is however constrained by various threats, including indiscriminate crossbreeding with exotic breeds and lack of appropriate breeding strategies.
The more we crossbreed, especially if it's not planned, the more we crossbreed, the more we actually lose that indigenous genetic pool. In that case, we might actually end up with crossbreds, which cannot give you back the indigenous breeds where you originally started from. So if it's not planned, it can really have negative impacts on our indigenous breeds. So we should really try, if it's a program, just to make sure that we want to produce enough meat, we can do it in a planned manner, and we only do it for a short time, and then we stop at what we call the F1.
More and more farmers, as they grow their farming enterprises into businesses, tend to do crossbreeding, to put more meat on the carcass, to get more milk in every cow. And we realize that we might wake up one day, not very far from now, 20 years, 50 years from now, and discover that we had something unique, hardened against local disease, adapted to local conditions, which we have lost because of crossbreeding.
For many years, we were told our own breeds, which have adapted to our conditions, disease conditions, climatical changes, we were told it is inferior. After we were made to crossbreed, we suddenly realized that we have lost all those attributes that were very important to us.
Due to these challenges, the Pan-African Farmers Organization PAFO, a continental farmer organization comprising of 5 regional farmer organizations, namely Sakau from Southern Africa, Ropa from Western Africa, Propac from Central Africa, Iya from Eastern Africa, and Umnagri from Northern Africa, organized the PAFO Africa Forum on 26 to 28 September 2016 in Nairobi to deliberate on strategies to protect, preserve, and promote the African indigenous livestock breeds.
We wanted to preserve our indigenous livestock, and this forum is only the beginning of a campaign to preserve our indigenous livestock, to make them recognized by the international institutions, and to have a whole activity to preserve them.
have lost a few of those breeds over the last 2 decades. And that is when PAFO decided that we will launch this first ever farmer-driven initiative, literally from Cape Town to Morocco, from Madagascar to Egypt, and ensure that we maintain, we protect, we promote and we preserve those indigenous stuff. If it is not for the sake of the animals, it's definitely for the sake of those communities, those farmers who have bred them over the last few centuries. There's a cultural dimension to this too. This is one thing which all farmers in Africa have common. We love our animals. We identify ourselves in terms of these animals. This is all the more the reason that we may not be remembered as the generation in whose hands these animals went extinct.
For the first time, we wanted we farmers to be able to put ourselves together and demand from all those working around livestock support to be able to work on issues that we like to see being addressed in indigenous animals. And this particular workshop is actually a very important starting point. And we farm organizations, there is a lot we can actually do about indigenous animals. But we cannot be able to do it properly without a roadmap, without a strategy.
During the forum, speaker after speaker reiterated that indigenous livestock breeds need to be promoted, protected, and preserved.
What can we do to make sure that we resurrect the desire to respect and value indigenous livestock, regardless of the negative attachment that the past literatures have imposed on it?
Pastoralists will continue doing pastoralism, but economics is a big force for them. How do you get these animals to the market? What do they lack to get to the market? If you are able to make that animal to get to the market and bring income, then they will continue doing what they are doing. For example, what does the red Maasai have as it is small, but does it have something, whether in the meat, in the other things, that can make it more marketable? I talk about niche markets. So you are selling that animal not just because it's an animal of meat, but because of something it has. And there are people who have done that in other products. Like you sell a product because it's coming from the communities, and the community will be receiving this. So you put something on top of that animal to get the market.
We need to promote the meat and the byproducts as organic, because most of the exotic animals are fed, are zero grazed and fed on supplements.
However, this can only happen if appropriate and up-to-date indigenous livestock data is generated, more awareness created on the value of these breeds, and a proper policy framework at national, regional, and continental levels are formulated to help curb certain challenges like biopiracy that has led to great loss of genetic materials from the continent.
We should develop a continental strategy, or at least one that is anchored at that level, in which the future of indigenous breeds can be managed in a controlled manner, and not in the way that it's happening now, that breeds can simply go extinct while you're not watching, but to have a structured plan for these breeds that is based on either their economic potential or on their importance as a public good, simply because we cannot afford as a world, as an earth, to lose them.
The main objectives of this expert forum was to create awareness on the current status of indigenous livestock breeds for each of the 5 regions, namely Northern, Eastern, Western, Central, and Southern Africa. To discuss best practices with respect to keeping and production of indigenous livestock breeds within each of these regions. To be informed about available marketing opportunities for indigenous breeds at national and regional levels, and to be informed about available support measures such as breeding programs, research and lobby initiatives for the protection and promotion of indigenous livestock breeds.
Kenya is a net importer of livestock, so we are deficient on livestock. Nairobi as a market is very large, so we consume almost 2,000 head of cattle every day. So if we're going to look at the whole idea of indigenous species, then we must begin to understand exactly where our cattle comes from. Again, as I said, we're deficient. So most of our cattle comes from across the border.
The longhorned Ankole cattle are very big animals with very long horns, and they now been found to be used by Chinese and Eastern people for aphrodisiac purposes. Aircraft industry wants them to use them for as washers because they don't heat up like metal, which they have been using, so they are on high demand and we are exporting them to China. So in terms of value, about the horns you want to get rid of, they are getting more and more valuable, like the tusks of the elephant.
On the second day of the forum, all participants from different organizations across the continent were given an opportunity to visit 2 separate ranches where indigenous livestock breeds are reared. Group A was taken to Kapiti Plains Ranch in Machakos, that is approximately 1 hour 25 minutes to the southeast of Nairobi, and Group B visited Soisambu Ranch located in Naivasha, northwest of Nairobi. They all got an opportunity to see, learn, and share a lot of knowledge on some of the best genetic resources kept at the farms and the best practices used.
We have seen visiting this ranch is something very important that everyone of us from different area should try to learn. When there is a good experience where we can see good genetic material, how this material can be accessible for the other farmers in other area of Africa.
In order to achieve some of these attributes that we are looking for, the best practices is actually to avoid inbreeding. And one of the best way to avoid inbreeding for an indigenous animal, like the ones we are trying to conserve, is always to be able to get new genes into your herd from a source that you know has not been corrupted, either by crossbreeding or introduction of genes outside the breed. For example, the Boran Breed Society have kept, and over years, always gone back to the north, get that animal that is very original. It may look smaller and crude, but the genes and the attributes of the Boran is still there to come and sustain that gene bank of the improved Boran. It is always good to go back to the original gene bank. If not, go to another farm that has been breeding also their animals according to their environment. And you will always find that your genes are not very much related with the genes of the other farm, who have been also over years been selecting for the attributes of their environment. And this way, we will be able to maintain the breed, we will have the breed characteristics, and we will continue always breeding without inbreeding, so that we don't have negative effects also within the breed.
The best animal husbandry practice: bring food to the animal, bring hay to the animal, bring agro-byproducts to the animal, so that, and then bring water to the animal, because this is a very improved animal which gives you a lot of milk and is heavy. It cannot move long distances. But if you bring conserved feeds and the water to it, it will convert that into a lot of milk and meat. And then vaccinate the animals. Okay? So those are the best animal husbandry practices we recommend.
Is lack of a proper policy framework and poor implementation to blame in the preservation and conservation of indigenous breeds across the continent?
There are general livestock policies, However, there is no specific national policy or legislation on the management of these indigenous animal genetic resources. So there's a gap in terms of policy. The livestock policies that exist are either incomplete, outdated, and if they are available, then they are unimplemented. And with that, most of the countries are now reviewing their policies to take into consideration, for example, the climate change issues as well as the indigenous animals.
Implementation of policies which the government themselves make are not followed up because there are other interests which come in and they distort the whole setup. It's very unfortunate that this is true in most African countries. Some have got brilliant policies, brilliant everything, but zero implementation.
We need to re-engage with the African government to make sure that we have got policy positions that promotes indigenous livestock production and to make sure they are protected, and automatically this would boost household food security because agricultural production would go up. We would be able to produce more, be able to feed the growing population. So that's very, very crucial.
And what role can farmers' organizations play?
These farmer organizations can assist us to take the message out to the farmers of the value and also promote these indigenous livestock. And it's not only in terms of production, but also marketing of the products. So these organizations really play a big role. So as we are doing our research of conserving these animals, identifying, conserving, and promoting, we really have to engage the farm organizations.
The farm organizations that are members of PAFO, they are professional organizations. And the first thing we have to do as organizations at sub-regional level is to mobilize our national organizations to be able to actually update our livestock strategies to capture indigenous animals. Two, we cannot be able to do it alone. We need partnerships with the governments and development partners and other non-government organizations working with the pastoralists where the indigenous animals are actually found. This partnership is actually key. We have to lobby so that there are policy changes that actually repositions indigenous livestock in the ministries of agriculture and livestock development.
As the forum came to an end, participants were also given an opportunity, based on the 3-day deliberations, to give various recommendations on the way forward.
We need systems to be put into place where, as soon as a disease breaks out, it is spread throughout the countries, and the neighboring countries know that there's a potential. However, what is happening in practice, nobody wants to say that we have rinderpest or we have this, because it will impact on the exports and it will also impact on imports of different products.
There is a need for establishment of regional and or national gene banks as for sustainable animal genetic resources management.
We need to domesticate continentally the production, protection, preservation, promotion, and marketing of the indigenous livestock breeds and species at the AU level. And the PAFO needs to assume this responsibility by engaging in lobbying and advocacy so that this is mainstreamed at African level.
We need to set up this databases of what do we have, what are ours, what do they look like, where are they, in order to ensure that in 50 years from now, we can still be as proud of what is truly African as we are today.
Actually, this deliberation, the meeting has been very, very fruitful. What I've learned is farmer organizations, they are very key in terms of preservation, promotion of indigenous animal genetic resources. These are the custodians of the indigenous animals that we are promoting, preserving, conserving. So if we leave them out, we cannot achieve anything. So it is really important to involve them in all the stages whether it's identifying the indigenous animals, looking at the value, making awareness of the value of the indigenous animals. They also play a key role.